Okay, I've got 6 o'clock. I think why don't we go ahead and get going here. I want to thank everybody for showing up this evening. My name's Paul Keisler. I'm the Public Works Director and Town Engineer for Oro Valley. So I'm your local voice and your local advocate for anything that's being built in the town. I do want to go through a couple of housekeeping things. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be doing a presentation this evening to discuss the wildlife fencing in and around your neighborhoods. And when we're going to do some brief introductions, then we're going to do a PowerPoint presentation. So if anybody is on by phone, this is a very visual presentation. So if you do have the ability to connect with something that will show a picture, that'd be advantageous. So I'm going to start off with a little housekeeping. After we're done with our presentation, we want to take your questions. This has been a long journey with the neighborhood, and we certainly want to be able to answer any of your thoughts, any of your questions with regard to this project, because we've heard you loud and clear over these past couple of years, and we want to make sure this is successful for everybody. So with that, let me go through the housekeeping. I'm going to share my screen real quick. All righty. Mike, is my screen being shared? I don't
see it.
Here. Helps when I do that. So, Mike, can you see this?
We can, yes.
Okay, great. So, like I said, we're going to be doing a presentation this evening, and as such, everyone's microphone is going to be, other than myself and my panel colleagues, will be muted throughout tonight's meeting, unless it's your turn to speak. This is to ensure a smooth and efficient meeting as possible. I can only turn on your microphone at the appropriate time when it's your turn to ask a question and provide comments. This will be the same for your video. For those of you who are unfamiliar with Zoom, I'll provide a quick how-to on the participation. During the question and comment period, if you wish to speak, please use the raise your hand function in Zoom. So there's two ways to do this. I see I have one person who's called in by phone. To be able to raise your hand, press *9, and after you press *9, you're going to need to use the passcode, and I'm going to give you a moment to grab a pen and paper, just in case you don't have this at your fingertips. So that number is 331779. Again, that number is 331779. That's the passcode for this meeting. But as I mentioned before, this is a very visual presentation. So if you have the ability to log in with video, please do so. So for those of you participating on any platform that uses the Zoom app or website, this screenshot is how you would be able to raise your hand. So please find the participants icon. It's either at the top or bottom of your screen, depending on your device. Click on the participants, and just in case it's not up with words, it's the picture of two heads next to each other. This will open up a dialog box, and you'll see an option to raise your hand. That's shown here. Alternatively, if you're using an iPad, you may need to click on the three dots that say more, and that will give you the option to go ahead and raise your hand as well. Raised hands. So we don't have that many people, but for those of you who do raise your hand, you'll be moved to the top of the list, and then I'll announce your name, and hopefully I don't butcher it, and please correct me if I do. We'll unmute your mic, and if you like, we'll turn your video on, and then you'll be able to speak. I ask that you keep, so that we keep the meeting moving, you try to keep your comments to within about 3 minutes. We'll go ahead and listen to what you have to say, and then I'll pick on one of my colleagues or myself to go ahead and try to provide you an answer. Then we'll move on to the next, and we'll keep going this evening. Hopefully we can go through the presentation and answer all your comments by 7 o'clock, because I know your time is valuable. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And here we all are. So I want to introduce Mr. Jim DeGrood with the Regional Transportation Authority. Jim, why don't you take it away?
Well, thank you very much. Everybody hear me okay? Okay, good. First of all, I'd like to thank everybody for attending this Zoom meeting this evening. I know it's been quite a while since we had an in-person meeting, and we're all adapting to the new technologies, the new requirements of post-pandemic or during the pandemic public meetings. Again, I want to thank you all for attending. There are a number of things that have changed over the intervening months since the last time we've met. First of all, those of you who may have worked with Mike Holder, who had been our project manager working on the fencing work, Mike has retired. So he will no longer be working with us on this particular project. We do still have Mr. Ellis, who's with us. He's the blue man on the screen this evening, and he is the Transportation Services Director for Pima Association of Governments and the Regional Transportation Authority. Additionally, we have Brian Ravislute. Brian has been working with this project since it was an ADOT project. He was the project manager on the original design of SR 77, the wildlife overpasses, and so forth. So he has an immense amount of background on this project, and we have engaged him to do the design work on this particular project. I would also add that the relationship that we have with the town of Oro Valley on this particular project is evolving. With Mr. Holder's departure from our organization, we are pivoting and will no longer be doing our own contracting on projects. And we've been working with Mr. Keisler. We're very grateful to the town and Mr. Keisler for being willing to work with us on passing the implementation portion of the project over to the town. We think who better to deliver the services to the town than the town staff. So we're very grateful to the town for being willing to do that. We're still the financial partner on this, so we will be funding the activities of the town. And with that kind of description of how things are evolving, would like to introduce Brian Ravislute. Brian is the project engineer and designer on the project, and I will pass it over to you, Brian, so that you can speak to how the design has evolved and what we're looking at in terms of a project to build in the community. Brian.
Great. Thank you, Jim, and hopefully everyone can hear me as well. I'm gonna share my screen now. All right, I hope everyone can see a presentation. All right, so just to give a little more background, we started looking at designing and laying out some of the improvements last month, and we're going to continue doing that, in the new year with plans of these improvements, going to construction this summer. So to give a little more just background on our location, this is kind of a location map. You can see, put some kind of black circles on the map, kind of around where Big Wash Overlook is and Scenic Overlook. And then the other circles are kind of to show the southern and northern limits of what we're looking at for kind of our improvements in this area. The green lines on the map show some of the previous efforts that installed wildlife fencing along Oracle Road. And then there was the underpass structure that was installed basically in between Scenic Overlook and Big Wash neighborhoods. And then there was the wildlife overpass crossing that allows for animals to cross over the roadway that was installed closer to the Santa Catalina Catholic Church. So these improvements and what we'll be going through are improvements to kind of close off some of the last remaining gaps. So I kind of mentioned we'd be breaking these up into what we're calling our southern end and our northern end, and then our two side streets. So our current proposed plan for the southern end, which is just south of Scenic Overlook, and there's a stretch there of existing sound wall, ADOT sound barrier, would be to install a 6-foot-high wildlife fence kind of at the southern limit of that wall, and that would tie into the wall and then extend and terminate before basically this development wall over here. That would also have a gate in it to allow for mandatory maintenance access for utilities, and it would be kind of a block off on this southern end. Now, to kind of give an idea of what that might look like, kind of in a typical section, if you were standing in the shoulder of Oracle Road near that wall, and you were looking northbound with southbound traffic coming at you, this would kind of show what that 6-foot-high fencing and gate may look like. Another kind of visual to get a good idea of what we're talking about, this kind of shows a rendering of what that fencing would look like. You can see some of the Scenic Overlook housing in the background and how that fence would kind of tie into that existing ADOT sound wall. So I'm sure many of you have noticed the fencing that is existing out there. This is just a few examples, pictures from Oracle Road of it's actually the 8-foot-high fence that is installed out there. So what we'd be proposing for that southern end would actually be shorter, it'd be 6-foot-high, but it would look very similar to both these pictures. The gate would be similar. And our picture on the right is actually the existing fencing limits that exist just north of Big Wash Overlook. So moving on, this was kind of our southern limits discussion. We want to move to the far end, to the northern end, where there is a driveway and of course a fire access into the back of the Big Wash Overlook neighborhood. So what you can see here is previously or most recently, there was some fencing efforts where you can see these red X's where fencing was installed along kind of the property boundary to kind of close off this gap. So what we're proposing now to improve is to remove what you see where the red X's are of that recently installed fence, and to tie in a couple short segments of wildlife fence. Once again, this would just be the 6-foot-high wildlife fence into the back of the existing ADOT wall, and then tying into the existing fence over here, and then having a cattle guard or potentially even a wildlife gate at this location. This would allow for us to close off this northern end as well. So here's kind of a rendering of what this driveway, it looks like today and existing. There is a gate there. That gate would remain, and there'd be a few short pieces of that new wildlife fence, and then a cattle guard or potentially a gate there. And you can see Big Wash Overlook here to the left. So moving to, we're going to touch on each of our actual side streets, starting with Scenic Overlook, and then we'll move to Big Wash. The proposed plan for both these side streets is very similar, so we'll go through each of them, but the plan here is to introduce a new roadway entrance gate. That gate would swing inward towards the neighborhood. There would be pedestrian gates where the existing sidewalk crossings are. And then there would be a 6-foot high combination kind of view fencing and masonry wall that would close off this area and tie into the back of the existing sound walls on either side. So there would be maintenance gates on each side as well, kind of like we mentioned on the southern end, that would allow for access for utilities. And then you can see these black lines shown in plan view are kind of what we're representing as that combo wall and combo fence. So Big Wash Overlook, like I mentioned, same features, new gate, new combination wall with view fencing, pedestrian gates, as well as maintenance gates. So what we wanted to do is, you can see this in plan view, but a visual or a rendering can give a much better idea of what's trying to be introduced there at both these side streets. So what we did is we created just kind of one rendering. This one's actually looking west at the Big Wash Overlook, but the improvements at Scenic Overlook would be very similar. So you can see the combination of view fencing / masonry wall tying into the existing walls on each side, as well as the view fencing gates that would be installed where the sidewalk is located. And then this is kind of a rendering of what the custom entrance gate would look like. We thought kind of showing some rustified aesthetics with the mountains kind of similar to the background would be something that would be very pleasing. And this would be something that would be similar to what would be done at Scenic Overlook as well. So this rendering, I think, gives a good idea of what those features would look like. And going to move on to our last one, Paul, which is when I think we're going to open it up for questions.
All right. So thank you, Brian. So this is, I know the presentation was short and sweet. We're also going to put this presentation on the project page that you were able to get to this meeting to see the visuals, at your convenience. But we want to hear from you. So Brian, why don't you go ahead and stop the share. There we go.
Yep.
And I'll be looking for folks from the neighborhood. Now, I hope I have one hand raised already. Couple now. So I've got phone number 404-3028. So you are unmuted. Obviously, we're not going to put a video on you. I'll ask first, do you have a video going of this meeting as well?
Yeah, good evening, everybody. I do have a video, and
Okay.
I do have a couple of questions. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Yeah, please.
Okay. All right. First off, I'm a resident here off of Scenic Overlook. So I understand the fencing and all the other proposals. Our main concern is this gate. We have some questions about it. Number one, for safety's sake, Oracle Road is a nightmare of a hazard. From your rendition, it looks like that gate is far enough back. Now, we were told this is an automated gate. I'm curious to know, how is it automated? Are we talking about a road sensor? Are we talking about devices that we need to carry in our vehicles as residents? The other question is, and this was a concern of my wife's, other gated communities, their HOAs pay for maintenance and operation of these gates. We never elected to have a gate. Are we going to end up paying for this?
So,
And the last question that I have, and you guys can address all three of them if you would, as far as safety goes, obviously these are electrically operated gates. Should there be a failure of power in the area, how do we open these gates? Will these gates default to being open? Scenic Overlook is the only entrance and exit to this area of the development. So if that gate fails, we're basically stuck. That's my question.
sure. I'm sorry. I can go ahead and start with this, and then I'll ask probably Mr. DeGrood to chime in as well. So just kind of lay down some basics for the gates. And your question with the HOA was very poignant. We cannot have exclusive gates on public streets. So both of these neighborhoods are public streets, and they were chosen to be public streets, and you want them as such. So the gate has to be open for everybody who comes up to it. So it's going to be an automobile sensor. So the sensor will sense that the gate will sense the automobile approaching the gate, and then will open automatically. Now, there is the plan of having the gate open during the daylight hours, and then it would be shutting at dusk and opening back up at dawn. And while it is closed, it does need to have the sensors to let people in and out freely. The cost of this is actually, it's borne originally by the RTA. The RTA is providing the funding to construct it, and then providing the town funding for maintenance thereafter. So the town will be responsible for the actual maintenance. The funding generate, from the RTA. Now, your last concern is what happens if power goes out? Well, there will be into our construction fail safes for that power to be, or for the gate to be opened. And I don't know, Mr. DeGrood, would you like to chime in on that particular aspect?
Certainly. And first, I'd like to confirm everything that Mr. Keisler just said. We will be fully funding the cost of this, and we understand that there will be ongoing expenses to the town of Oro Valley, and we will underwrite those costs. So in terms of exposure that the residents might see financially for this particular operation, we don't anticipate that will occur. Mr. Keisler is also correct in stating that the gates will be normally open during daylight hours, normally closed during the evening hours or after dusk, and they will be opened automatically upon approach by a vehicle. So there will be no need for any kind of a controller in people's cars. It will be detected, and the gates will open as a result of that detection. And my understanding, and Mr. Ravislute can confirm this, he's been in direct contact with the gate manufacturer. We are going sole source on the gate. We are using the same gate company that provides the gates within the Rancho Vistoso community. We felt it important that it be consistent throughout the community, even though this is a public application here. But correct me if I'm wrong, Brian, but this is a gate that in the event of a power failure, they will default to opening.
That is correct. Yep. In the event of a power failure, the gate defaults to open, and we have been working, like Jim mentioned, with a local gate company that's very familiar with Vistoso community has installed a lot of gates for Vistoso. So we're working on some of those details as well, just like you mentioned of how the gate opens, et cetera. I think the gate will open, like Paul and Jim mentioned, as vehicle approaches.
I'd like to add one more thing too. You know, with every plan, there's always Murphy's Law. So what I do want to mention is because the town is involved with this, we do have 24-hour maintenance for our street operations. So if there was ever an instance where the fail-safe of the gate opening during a power failure or something else happens, you know, a car gets stuck on it for whatever reason, you can call 911 and emergency crews will be out there immediately to go ahead and address it. And those would be Oro Valley emergency crews. So we're right here. We respond immediately. You know how fast our police respond. Our public works, we respond nearly as fast. We'd be there within minutes. So I was going to say, we don't have a lot of raised hands. Mike, if you could unmute 404-3028. Just I hope we answered your questions on this.
Yeah, he'll have.
Mike? Okay.
I tried to unmute him. He'll have to unmute on his end, or else if you want to move on to the next person, we can do that.
Okay. Okay. Not seeing an unmute. I'll move on to Henry's iPad. Henry, the floor is yours.
Henry is Pat Miller. It's his iPad. Okay, hey, I get kudos for even figuring this out to even join today. Just a few things. That's going to be black view fencing. And at the bottom of the entrance of the pedestrian gates on either side of the car gates, it looks like you've got like a 3-foot high fine mesh at the bottom of those pedestrian walkway gates. Please check with the HOA because I thought by the CCNRs that kind of fencing can only be used in our backyards, just to check. And for the brick that you're going to use for the extension of the sound wall coming off of Oracle, is there any possibility of having that split face brick used to blend in with the existing wall that we have so it's just not plain cinder block? It would look a lot nicer and it would almost give the look of having it I'm blocking out the word I want of having it what am I looking for? Having it finished off roughly so that it would look nice. But I think if that extension of that kind of brick was brought, that's currently being used on our sound walls we've got, I think that would dress it up instead of it just being a bunch of plain cinder block blocks. At the north end of the street, of the fencing that you're going to take down, they took out 6 feet of vegetation to put that fencing in, and there's a lot of erosion. Animals have dug under it, and I was wondering if that's going to be fixed as part of the project and maybe revegetate that section. And my other concern with at the south end where you're going to put the fencing at the gap by Scenic Overlook, there's a beautiful, huge Palo Verde tree there. If you can please go in front of that with the fencing so that you don't do anything to destroy that tree. I know Jessica Moreno and we walked that and looked at it. And I think there's a way that you can go in front of that. And so the neighbors don't see that fence because the first, I think, 2 or 3 homes there are 2-story homes. Is there any trees or something they could just plant along the north side of that fence so that eventually, you know, it will be obscured and not so obvious that that's there? That's most of my questions for now.
Well, Pat, thank you. Mr. Giroux, do you want to start?
Sure. As far as I'm concerned, we're very happy installing a split face block if that's something that Brian can confirm. That would be great. I believe the railing is typically black. However, I don't know that it has to be black. It can certainly be painted or it can be rusticated. We'll ask Brian to make a recommendation on that. And Brian, could you comment on the alignment of the oh, before I ask you to do that, I will confirm, yes, we will revegetate the area where the fence is being removed from. So that is that's part of the expectation when we do the removal. So with that, I'll ask Brian to comment on this further.
Yes, that's definitely a good point on the southern end. I actually walked that as well. It's been a few months, but we noticed that tree and a lot of that's because it's pretty heavily vegetated. So I think the current alignment we're showing is definitely supposed to avoid that tree itself and the majority of the vegetation. It kind of is going to come perpendicular off of the existing wall, and then it's going to angle off to avoid that tree.
Thank you. Pat, did that answer all of your questions? Mike, can we unmute Pat?
I think to have the view fencing black, that would blend in with all the black view fencing that we have in the rest behind our homes and stuff. So to keep it consistent, that's my opinion, that I think black would be nice.
Okay. Okay. All right. Well, Pat, thank you for your questions. I'd like to move on to Donna Raffanti. Did I say that right?
Yeah, well, actually, it's Mike, her husband.
Oh, okay. Mike?
I've got some years working on gates through GSA. I was a vendor. This is going to be a fail-safe swinging gate, so there'll be no. I'm in the house right up against the gate on scenic overlook. I'm worried about noise. First of all, it's not going to be chain driven, right? Chain driven gates are very loud, especially open at night. And it's a fail-safe swing gate, correct?
Yes.
So it's all going to be hydraulic bars. Which are quieter. But like I said, there's going to be a stop pole. They're both opening towards my house. At 2 a.m. when they clang against that pole, the rubber stops on those things deteriorate rapidly, especially in this town. I worked and maintained them in San Francisco. We didn't have that problem. But in Arizona, those things can go in 2 years. And I know with the federal government, they got replaced about 3 months after requested. If I'm going to have clanging and banging literally 20 yards from my bed, it's going to be an issue. Also, the control cabinet. Even though it's fail-safe, there'll probably backup batteries and a power supply and everything in a 4-foot cabinet. I'm hoping that's away from my house on the other side by the fire department or by the fire hydrant. Has your control system location been determined yet?
I believe we're still working on the details. Are we correct, Brian?
That's correct, Paul. We're still determining.
But
it'd be logical that was away from my house and over there where there's no house. You just have the brick wall and a bunch of common property.
Right. So I think I heard 2 things here, and I want to see if those can both be worked into the design. One is, can we create a stopping mechanism for the gate that doesn't require the gate to stop against a bar? I lived in an HOA here in the middle of Oro Valley that had automatic gates, and those gates stopped automatically. They didn't have a stop bar. So as far as I knew, the only noise that came from the gate was the hinge in the bar and the mechanism itself. And this is in the middle of a residential area with houses around on both sides, very close to them, much like this. So we hear your comment, and I want to make sure that that's an element that we can include into the construction of these.
Is there will be given a phone number or something? I have some other questions I can do off this about the actual curb. The angle of my curb is so steep. My wife's Volvo and my car, we have to swing out and back in to
Mhm.
stop from scraping the bottom of our car. When I
Right.
first bought this house in 2005, I drove a van and she drove an SUV.
Sure.
So we didn't run into this problem. And on your drawings, I think the space of the gate to my house is a lot longer than it actually is gonna be when it's open.
Mhm.
And when someone comes out here, there's like a handicap path above my driveway that I have to swing one side of the tire in if I come in frontward. Of
Okay.
course, if both gates are open during the day, my quick left turn from when I enter is gonna be blocked. Before we start smashing concrete and stuff, I'd like to see some markings on the pavement or something. Obviously, right?
Yeah, we can do that, and as we get the details together more, thanks for bringing up this issue so that we can go ahead, and it sounds to me like as you come in, you're gonna have to make a direct left and a straight
Exactly.
shot in.
Right, and it's gonna be tight.
Right. So that's something that we're gonna have to consider.
All right. I'll be waiting for that phone number after the meeting. Thank you.
Okay, I'll go back. Oh, actually, got one more. Taylor. So if we could unmute Taylor.
Hello, yeah, you've got Terry here.
Okay, Terry,
Yeah,
floor's yours.
I just wanted to reiterate, looking at the design overall, it looks like you're working to make it look as eye-pleasing as possible. So I applaud that. And I want to reiterate what Pat was saying, that when you look at that neighborhood, any of these neighborhoods, like you did with the gate, where you kind of blended, a mountainscape, because you can see that mountainscape in the background into the gate. Things like paying attention to small details like what type of blocker used, et cetera, make a huge difference and very little cost difference usually, if any.
Agreed. I believe
So I just want to reiterate, if we could really pay attention to some of those details. I think, you're already putting together something that looks nicer than I expected it to look for wildlife fencing. So, you've set the foundation to make it blend, basically to essentially, I think what Pat was trying to say, it would be good if it looks like, if it blends into the subdivisions like it was originally designed to be that way, and you're really almost there. It's just things like blocks and color, block style and color that do it.
One.
Correct.
Yes.
So I think that's what a lot of people would prefer, is something that it looks like it was originally built the subdivision that way.
Right. And I think that's our goal as well. That's our goal, is to have this blend and to look as purposeful as possible.
Yeah. And then my other concern was, when you take that, you're already going to deal with that erosion and stuff that's occurring up here at the north end where I am. I lost my train of thought for a sec. Are these gates like sprung to open when you lose power? My wife was concerned. My wife goes into work early, so real early in the morning. So she was concerned about, what do I do if the gate won't open?
Right. So Brian, can you answer that?
You kind of did already, I think, but
Well, I think, and I want to work, we'll work together on this with regard to what the fail safes themselves. So there's an automatic springing open if a loss of power as one fail safe. And we'll see what else that we can do that becomes an easy fail safe for.
I remember in the first meeting, and I don't remember which of you, it was one of the engineers, and I don't remember if, I don't think it was you, Paul.
Mhm.
It could have been a resident who's been an engineer. I don't remember for sure, but they were talking about gates that were actually hydraulically sprung to open and stay open,
Right.
and that it was electric that held them shut.
I think that's the route that we're looking at.
Yeah. Okay. That was all I had.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for your comments.
Mhm.
All right. Back on, looks like I've got Pat again. Can we unmute Henry's
Yeah,
iPad?
okay. And I'm getting old. Stucco was the word I was looking for before. I know you said stucco was too hard to maintain, so I think the split face brick would actually look quite nice and blend in.
Yeah. Yes.
How is this project going to be done? I mean, our streets aren't that wide, and I'm just wondering, I'm assuming you're going to do one half and then do the other half so that we can go through the street. How is
Well,
that
yeah.
going to logistically be done?
We will, yes, we will have to, because again, it's a public street, and for both neighborhoods, it's the only way in and out.
Right.
And there's no place to park your cars outside. I mean, you literally have to park on Oracle Road, which wouldn't be allowed. So we're going to have to construct in such a fashion that we maintain access the entire time.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
That was it.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Oh, and I'm sorry, one thing. The HOA just a couple years ago put in all new water lines and all that vegetation. It took 14 years to get vegetation at our street entrances, which is now going to probably all be removed. Can that just be repurposed somewhere else so we don't just throw that away?
We'll do, we'll see what can be salvaged.
Okay. That's it.
That was it?
That's
Thank
it.
you, Pat. Okay, thank you, Pat. How about if we could unmute Susan Wood?
Hello, thank you. When will this project go before the VCA ALRC committee for final approval?
So sure. So what we wanted to do is we wanted to meet with you folks first and give you because we're the ones, or you're the ones who've been working closely with us. We had already approached long ago, 2 years ago, the VCA with regard to the original plan. The VCA is aware of this meeting. I've been in communication with them, and the VCA president, we converse on a fairly regular basis. So I'll be reaching out to them after this meeting. We first wanted to make sure that we had all of your comments and questions worked into this before we go ahead and finalize this with the VCA.
So on your gates and fencing,
Mhm.
you say you don't have an exact material.
Well,
Are you going to present that at the ALRC meeting?
well, I'm going to find, I will work with them before I go to the meeting. I'm going to actually work with the president and see what
The
all the,
ALRC, you need to go to the ALRC first.
no, I understand that, but we're going to want to get what all the requirements are. And then of course, we're going to have all of that for the VCA, for the committee.
Okay, and then, you know, the committee only meets once a month on the third Wednesday of the month.
Right, and this will not be constructed till next fiscal year, which starts after July 1st anyways.
Okay.
So there's some time here. What we're doing here is we want to lay all the groundwork, make sure everybody's on the same page, and then get all our ducks in a row to move forward.
Okay, thanks.
Sure, thank you. Thank you for your comments. Next I have 404-3028. If we can unmute.
Paul, they just may have to unmute on their end.
Okay. There you go.
Sorry about that. Stupid
No problem.
iPhone.
No problem.
My wife has questions. Go ahead.
So I haven't been on the previous meetings for this, but my question is, well, twofold. What is this costing you to do this, and why are we doing it? I mean, they spent millions of dollars to put the overpass, the underpass, the fencing, and now we need more. You know, of course, I'm seeing not a lot of, unfortunately, dead animals on the road, which was the whole purpose of that, you know, the underpass, the overpass. So why are they now proceeding doing more of this? And what is this costing?
Well, I'll start off and I'll hand it over to Mr. DeGrood. This isn't new. We've been working with the neighborhood for, I want to say, 2 years now. Because again, we were in the midst of, or the RTA was in the midst of putting up the fence. And that was a concern of the neighborhood. So we listened. And this has been a bit of a long process to get to the point of where we can have a design that works for everybody. And I'll kick it over to Mr. DeGrood with regard to the hows and the whys.
Sure. Agree with Mr. Keisler on that. And this is something that when we conceptualized the project initially, it was to provide the underpass and the overpass, and then to direct the wildlife to use them. Anything that, or any gaps that we have in the fencing, and we have fencing consistently up the state highway where it's along state property. We have a fence that runs the length of Catalina State Park on the east side of the private property all the way down to the CDO. And we're trying to basically confine the wildlife to or prevent the wildlife from getting onto the roadway, and that's the objective. Wherever we have gaps, we have the opportunity for a problem, and so that's what we've been steadily working for. I know folks have expressed some, or have observed. We hear different reports from people about observing or not observing wildlife on the roadway. What we're trying to do is make sure that this large investment that the region has made on trying to protect both the motorists and the wildlife is as effective as we can make it. So that's why we're moving forward with this. We have this piece and another piece along the Innovation Park. With that, we have everything pretty well tied up from the north of the wildlife overpass all the way down to the CDO. So that's the objective. The budget for the remaining portions of this project are $750,000 million. This is going to be a fraction of, or a portion of that cost, and the larger amount of money will be spent along the CDO, along Innovation Park. So that's probably the best answer I can give you. We don't have a hard bid yet on it. We've got a number of estimates. Mr. Ravislute could probably speak to the estimates better than I could at this point.
So my question is we're spending millions of dollars to put up this fencing to protect some wildlife, but yet our roadway, and maybe the RTA doesn't do the roadway, but Oracle Road is a horrible road to drive on. So is that like,
well,
where does that?
Sure, I can answer that one. The town's been working with ADOT for quite some time. ADOT has just started their Oracle Road rebuilding, and they are rebuilding Oracle Road from Tangerine all the way down to I-10 and Miracle Mile. So they are, it's a large project. That project's in 2 phases. Phase 1, which is from I-10 and Miracle Mile over to Miracle Mile and Oracle, and then up to Calle Concordia. That's phase 1. That's already been awarded. I believe Granite Construction is the contractor for that. And I'm waiting to get what the schedule is going to be and which side of that road they're going to start and how they're going to stage their construction. but that's going to be construction we're going to be seeing for the next 2 years. You can already see down around the Orange Grove area where they've been moving utilities. So that's already underway. And again, for Oro Valley, I'm still waiting to get that schedule to find out when they're actually going to be through Oro Valley. Phase 2, which has been funded by the state, so it's on their forward plan, is either going to start in 2022 or 2023. I would imagine they're going to not start it until after the first phase is completed. But that's conjecture on my part right now.
Okay, so
If I can, I'm sorry, may I jump in and just add some additional detail to that? Granite Construction mobilizes on April 9th, is my understanding. That's what we've heard. They will begin at the very south end and move north. I can tell you that we have contributed, RTA is contributing to upgrading the intersection of McGee and Oracle. We're adding a left or double left turns. And there will be actually continuous sidewalks added along the portion of Oracle Road to the north of River Road, where there are no sidewalks currently. So it's a substantial project.
And I have one other question, and I'm terribly sorry.
No, please.
So the land across from our home is for sale for about 109 acres. Okay, so you're putting up all this fencing and stuff. If that becomes property where they're putting up development, is all of this stuff then have to be renegotiated and moved? All the fencing and all that stuff, is that going to have to be moved if they put homes up there or down in the back?
Where's this? Where's this?
It's on Oracle, a little bit, I would say maybe a little bit south of Scenic Overlook. There's 109 acres for sale. So I'm assuming that
on the east side, Paul.
Oh, on the east side? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Is that the ranch?
I think it's the ranch, yeah.
Yeah.
So if someone buys that and decides to make that into a community, is it going to cost us more again to move all that fencing and everything?
No, that fence is already there, isn't it?
Yeah, if I may, we do have a fence that runs along the boundary of Catalina State Park and that property. So that's already secured. We're good.
Okay.
In other words, that's done.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, the only reason that we're doing this plan right now and that we're talking to you this evening is that we're hearing from an established neighborhood. And, you know, the hallmark of Oro Valley is listening to our residents. I know that's the hallmark of the RTA. All the local jurisdictions, we listen to our residents. So if there's existing residents and we're putting something new in, we're listening, and that's why we're here tonight.
Yeah, I just feel that like it's almost, you know, the way they're putting all these restrictions on where the animals can go and what they can do. And, you know, it's kind of like putting them in their own little zoo.
A little bit, and I'll speak as far as public safety goes. Why your town engineer endorses this so heavily is that there are videos, there are monitors. I think they had a mule deer very recently. And when there's a collision between the larger animals and passenger vehicles, that can sometimes be fatal for the passengers as well. So it's a public safety issue that we want to make sure that although it's somewhat rare, want to make sure it doesn't happen. So that's one of the main purposes for this.
Okay, wonderful. Well, thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for your comments. I want to move on to Joyce Pets. If we could unmute Joyce. Joyce, the floor is yours.
All right, thank you. Thank you for the meeting tonight. My question is that I just wondered what you have found when you've come to a neighborhood like ours and, you know, as far as security purposes, have you found that these swinging gates have improved the security of that neighborhood? Has maybe crime, you know, been reduced? having these kind of gates put in? I know the purpose of this whole thing is for the animals and to keep them contained within a certain area. But I just wondered, just being a person that's very, oops, sorry, I was getting a call in. Anyway, being a person that's very concerned about crime and crime in neighborhoods. And we are, after all, right off Oracle Road. It's a pretty, as you know, very busy roadway. And I'm just concerned as far as, and I have been since I moved here, concerned about people just coming in and out of our road. And we have had some incidents with crime. And I just wondered with this kind of gate now that would be coming into our roadway right off Oracle, have you seen with these kind of gates, has it reduced any crime having that?
Well, that's something I'd have to actually defer to police, to our PD, which are not here, but I could follow up with them. I can speak from personal experience. I lived in a gated neighborhood in La Cañada and Lambert, right in the heart of Oro Valley for 20 years. And I loved having the gate because that neighborhood was about as crime-free as you could get. Never heard of any incidences. I very much enjoyed that. I enjoyed that safety and I enjoyed that security. That's just, you're hearing from me personally on this. Now, the gate that we're installing, I don't know if one of these exists anywhere, quite frankly, is that we're gating a public road. And I think, as most people know, you cannot make a public road exclusive. That is, we can't, by law, we cannot segregate or not allow the general public into your neighborhood. So I don't know of any other automatic gates that have been put up. I think certainly it's going to give the impression that it's exclusive, but it will not act that way. Anybody driving up will be able to get in, and that it has to be that way unless the neighborhood were to take the streets over and they become private.
I understand that. And I'm sure they'll find that out as soon as they come and they see that the gate just swings open automatically.
Right.
And of course, if you have it open during the day, like you suggested is going to happen, they'll just come right in anyway. But it seems like, of course, criminals usually come at nighttime anyway, so that would be closed. The gate are you saying that the gate would close sometime around dusk? Is that about that time? And then it would open again, when the sun's coming up again. You said it's solar operated or?
No, Brian?
No, it'll be hard powered. Yep.
Okay, so it'll be on a timer that it automatically will stay open and close on some kind of timer that it would do that.
Timer or photocell, one of the two.
Okay, so I just wondered also, with that gate, have you guys ever designed, say down the road or something? Have you ever seen any, well, I guess you answered that question, but as far as security gates go, you don't design, the RTAs don't design a security gate that's just exclusive for residents and their guests?
Well, even if we did, and the town has designed security gates for our own facilities.
Right.
Working with a contractor, much as we're doing here today. We're working with a contractor. They're the expert in this.
Okay.
But and they are exclusive. We have devices to be able to open up the gates to our facilities as we drive up to them. But in your case, that's not the case.
Okay.
Yeah, well, by law, we can't do that.
Wondered. Okie dokie. That's pretty much my questions right now. Well, I did have another question. There's a lot of us on our neighborhood that like to take a hike on the back there and take that bike trail. How would we get onto that trail from? I'm right here on Big Wash Overlook. You said there's going to be a gate there that would allow utility people to come through. Would that gate be able, can we open it as well to go on our hikes? Or I mean, how do we access our trails?
Brian,
From
there'll be man gates, won't there?
Yes, yep. They will be
Yeah.
unlocked gates.
Oh, okay. All righty. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Let's go to Cheryl next. We can unmute Cheryl.
Hi, this is Cheryl Forte. I'm on the board of the VCA.
Yes.
As a homeowner, I'm thinking back to a couple of years ago, the VCA renovated and upgraded the plantings at the entrances to both Big Wash Overlook and Scenic Overlook.
Mhm.
So when the time comes, if you'd be willing to coordinate with the VCA, we can coordinate with the landscape company we use to make sure that any plants that will be affected can be removed and transplanted elsewhere so that they're not lost.
Right. Yeah. Well, no, I think, yeah, we certainly don't want to destroy anything that doesn't need to be destroyed.
Thanks.
And as I mentioned earlier, I'll be in coordination with the VCA after this meeting anyways.
Thank you. I'm glad to hear that.
Okay, thank you. We have, next up, we have Joe and Sherry. Jay. We could unmute.
Yeah, can you hear us okay? Can you hear us?
Yes, we can hear you. Please.
Yeah, thank Paul, Jim, and Brian, thank you much for having the meeting this evening. And just really quickly, do I understand it correctly that because they are public roadways that the gates have to be open during the day? Is that the reasoning?
No, the gates cannot be locked. So you can't have a mechanism that allows only certain people through the gates.
No, I understand that, but didn't we say that the gates would be programmed to be open during the daytime?
Yeah, and we did that out of a comment that we received early on from the neighborhood with regard to being able to have more free flow of traffic going in and out. And I think that's coupled, and I'll have Mr. DeGroot jump in. I think that's coupled with the wildlife movement that we're concerned about is really in the evening and at nighttime anyways.
Yeah, the only reason I ask that is because depending on when they're open and closed, there is movement, at least in our neighborhood on High Mountain View off of Scenic. There is movement in the early daylight hours through the neighborhood. So depending on when those gates are open, I was just wondering if that was why they had to stay open during the daytime hours.
No, there isn't a legal reason for them. It was merely built off of practical and negotiations with the neighborhood, with your neighborhood representatives. Yes.
Also, one quick question for Brian. What are you looking at for the total time frame for the project once you start?
That's a good question and something we're still going to be coordinating with our local gate company. So I don't have an exact answer for that. I can't imagine it's going to be from when we spoke with them more than a few months of actual construction.
Okay. Thank you all for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Well, we've hit the 7 o'clock hour. Any more last gasp questions? I think we've had some good discourse here. Hopefully, we've been able to answer and give you a good preview of what's to come and how this works for everybody. Like I mentioned before, you have my contact information on the website. And I can be a conduit if it's a question that I can't answer. Certainly, contacting our designer, Mr. Ravislute, or Mr. DeGroot, or Mr. Ellis. We're at your disposal. We're going to be working through a process. I'm going to be reaching out to the VCA, and sometime in the summer when it's scheduled, we'll start that construction. But again, it'll be through all the coordinations on all the approvals. So with that, I want to thank everybody for taking time out of your evening and showing up. Like I said, this was very productive, and I appreciate everybody, everybody's input. So I want to say thank you and have a good night.